Intermittent fasting is an amazing tool to help you normalize your weight and normalize your metabolic status, but I believe that it has some inherent problems, and I would like to talk about them today. Hello, I'm Dr. Sam, this is Dr. Sam's Health, and today I would like to talk about intermittent fasting. Last week I was making a video about sugars, whether they're dangerous or not, what are the problems with added sugars and so on. And while doing so, I gave an example of some hypothetical situation involving intermittent fasting. And while talking about it, something clicked, and I just realized that there is potentially an inherent problem with intermittent fasting. And I would like to talk about it today. I promised to talk about keto this week, but I will postpone it just a little bit for several days because I really feel that it's very important to talk about intermittent fasting right now. Before I begin, my regular disclaimers: I'm a medical doctor, but I do not provide any kind of medical advice over internet, over YouTube, or on my website, drsamshealth.com. Also, I will express some opinions here, and these opinions are not necessarily representing the opinions of my regulatory bodies, my colleges, my university, my profession, psychiatry. Also, in the very beginning of this video, I will give some sort of a medical caution or warning. It's not an advice, but I would like people to pay attention to certain things, just because as a medical doctor, I cannot not mention these things. So, without further ado, let's talk about intermittent fasting. Before I even begin talking about the inherent problem with intermittent fasting, I would like to say that if you are starting a very strict intermittent fasting protocol, your body will likely go through periods when your sugar levels drop, and your body needs to elevate sugar levels in a very specific and rather prompt fashion. And for some of us, especially if you have pre-diabetes, diabetes, if you're taking sugar-lowering medications, that might be a little bit problematic, and you essentially might get into the hypoglycemic state when your sugar levels are too low, and that might become an actual medical problem. So before you go on an intermittent fasting protocol, please consult with your physician, make sure that they are aware, and in general, I would suggest gradually working into intermittent fasting as a general rule. Having said that, I also want everybody know that I'm actually a big proponent of intermittent fasting. I see a lot of benefits in this approach, and whatever I'm talking about today should not be considered some sort of a cautionary tale against intermittent fasting. I actually follow this protocol most of the time. It works with my daily routines. I usually skip breakfast, I might skip lunch, and I consume most of my nutrients in the evening, before, after my workouts, and so on. So I'm a big proponent of intermittent fasting, but at the same time, I must say that in my opinion, intermittent fasting might lead to certain inherent problems. So let's talk about them. What am I talking in general? I'm talking about the fact that if you're going on intermittent fasting, you've got extended periods of low glucose levels, and then these periods are followed by spikes in glucose. And that might lead to changes in your body composition that will happen gradually over time. Let me get into some details here with the following example. Imagine that you are on a 1 meal a day protocol, something that I follow quite often. And essentially you are consuming your food over the course of maybe an hour tops, and the remainder of the day, 23 hours, you are not taking in anything, maybe just water, coffee, and so on. So what happens during the course of this 23 hours? There is certain glucose levels when you start. Usually they're pretty high because you just consumed a lot of food. These glucose levels have been dropped by insulin, and your body uses up this glucose. And when the glucose levels start dropping, your body needs to mobilize all the resources it has in order to maintain certain levels of glucose so that your brain can work properly, your red blood cells can work properly, and so on. So as it happens, your body starts utilizing glycogen. Usually we have, as a rule of thumb, enough glycogen for approximately 24 hours, but in my understanding, your body doesn't rely solely on glycogen, because our body doesn't have like a planning unit. It doesn't know that 24 hours from now or 23 hours from now it's going to get enough glucose to replenish this glycogen. What it does, it activates everything it can in order to create more glucose. The process is called gluconeogenesis. And the most common source for gluconeogenesis is protein. And obviously, we don't store protein, but we do have some protein that is essentially stored in multiple organs and systems. And the easiest source of protein would be amino acids that are part of our muscles. I'm not saying that it will be exclusively muscles, but our body will start utilizing all the amino acids in our system to convert them into glucose. Also, some organs like muscles, again, they have certain turnover of proteins. So constantly there are some proteins that have been degraded, broken down to amino acids, and these amino acids are normally reincorporated into different body structures, including muscles. Especially if you're working out, that process usually gets more active. So as we go without glucose for 23 hours, our body will likely take away these amino acids in our muscles and in our system in general, and will convert them into glucose. All this long-winded description leads to one simple thing that will happen. Likely your body will convert some of your muscle into glucose. I don't know the exact amount of muscle that will be essentially cannibalized to sacrifice to this process, but I could safely assume that we're talking about several grams, maybe 10 grams a day, maybe much more. I don't know, maybe later on I'll find some studies on that, but that's one side of the coin here. Then after 23 hours, you have your meal, and say you are just following the standard nutritional recommendations. You're consuming, say, 2,000 calories a day, and approximately 60% of that is carbohydrates. So approximately you're getting 1,200 calories from carbohydrates, which means that you're consuming approximately 300 grams of carbohydrates a day. This is a huge amount of carbohydrates to be consumed in one meal. There will be a spike of glucose, and your body will have to respond to it. It will produce some insulin, and insulin will lower glucose levels in your system in order to prevent hyperglycemia. And the actions of insulin, as we reviewed in my previous video, are the following. It will make glucose available for multiple organs and tissues. They will suck glucose out from the bloodstream into their cells, and these cells will use this glucose as they are pleased. So there will be some replenishment of glycogen, which is a given, but also some of this glucose will inevitably be converted into fat. And again, I don't know the exact parameters of that. On some logical level, it would make sense for your body to just bounce glucose between glycogen and bloodstream, but I know for sure that some of this glucose will be converted into fat. And that is a little bit problematic because, again, I don't know the exact amount, but every day over each cycle of your intermittent fasting protocol, you will be building likely several grams of fat. And again, I don't know the exact amount, but let's assume it's like 10 grams a day. It might be an understatement, it might be an overstatement, but just for the sake of this thought experiment, we'll use these parameters. So, as a result of all of this stuff happening, every 24 hours, your body will create several grams, say that's 10 grams of fat, and it will burn essentially 10 grams of muscle. So essentially, if you are on an intermittent fasting protocol over the course of many days, weeks, months, you will lose a lot of muscle and you will gain a lot of fat. You might be losing weight in general, but this conversion will be happening insidiously. So over the course of several months of being on a very strict, rather extreme version of intermittent fasting, you will likely start turning something that we call skinny fat, when your muscle is being replaced by fat. So you will lose decent amount of muscle in terms of like proportion to your body weight, and you will increase the body fat percentage. And that's obviously a huge problem, and we would like to avoid it. So the next question is how to avoid it. And just a note, I don't want to be perceived as somebody who's like thinking negatively about intermittent fasting. I actually do follow this protocol myself most of the time, and I'm concerned myself a little bit about it. So what I would like to do, I would like to offer you a solution for this situation, and I'll talk about this solution in my next video. I think this one is long enough, and I also would like you to follow my channel, hit the like button, subscribe, leave comments, hit the notification bell, so next time I post the video, you are alerted, and you can watch my solution. So next video will definitely be about the optimal or perfect intermittent fasting protocol. See you then.